Pippi is shipwrecked. Every day, as soon as school was out, Tommy and Annika rushed over to Villa Villacuela. They didn't even want to do their homework at their own house, but took their books over to Pippi's instead. "That's good," said Pippi. "Now you sit here and study, and no doubt a little knowledge will soak into me. Not that I really think I need it, but I suppose I can never be a really fine lady unless I know how many Hottentots there are in Australia." Tommy and Annika sat at the kitchen table with their geographies in front of them. Pippi sat in the middle of the table with her legs tucked under her. "Just think," said Pippi thoughtfully, pressing her finger on the end of her nose. "Suppose I did learn how many Hottentots there are in Australia, excuse me, and then one of them should go and get pneumonia and die. My count would be wrong. I would have had all that trouble for nothing, and I still wouldn't be a really fine lady." She thought about it for a few minutes. "Someone ought to tell the Hottentots to behave themselves so there wouldn't be any mistakes in your school books." When Tommy and Annika were through with their homework, the fun began. If the weather was nice, they played in the garden, rode horseback a little, or clambered up on the laundry roof and sat there drinking coffee, or climbed up into the old hollow oak tree and let themselves down into the trunk. Pippi said that it was a very remarkable tree, for soda grew in it. That seemed to be true, for every time the children climbed down into their hiding place inside the oak, they found 3 bottles of soda waiting for them. Tommy and Annika couldn't understand what happened to the empty bottles, but Pippi said they wilted away as soon as they were emptied. Yes, it was indeed a strange tree, thought both Tommy and Annika. Sometimes chocolate bars grew there too, but Pippi said that was only on Thursdays. Tommy and Annika were very careful to go there and pick chocolate bars every Thursday. Pippi said that if you gave yourself enough time to water the tree decently, you could probably get a French bread to grow there too, and perhaps even a small roast of veal. If it rained, they had to stay in the house, and that wasn't bad either. They could look at all the fine things in Pippi's chest, or sit in front of the stove and watch Pippi make waffles or fry apples, or climb into the woodbox and sit there listening to Pippi tell exciting stories about the times when she sailed the sea. "Goodness, how it stormed," Pippi would say. "Even the fishes were seasick and wanted to go ashore. I saw a shark that was absolutely green in the face and an octopus that sat holding its head in its many arms. My, what a storm that was." "Oh, weren't you afraid, Pippi?" asked Annika. "Oh, yes, just suppose you had been shipwrecked," said Tommy. "Oh, well," said Pippi, "I've been more or less shipwrecked so many times that I wasn't exactly afraid. Not at first, anyway. I wasn't afraid when the raisins blew out of the fruit soup at dinner, and not when the cook's false teeth blew out either. But when I saw that only the skin was left on the ship's cat, and that he himself was flying off completely naked toward the Far East, I began to feel a little unpleasant." "I have a book about a shipwreck," said Tommy. "It's called Robinson Crusoe." "Oh, yes, it's so good," said Annika. "Robinson, he came to a desert island." "Have you ever been shipwrecked?" asked Tommy, making himself a little more comfortable in the woodbox. "And landed on a desert island?" "I should say I have," said Pippi emphatically. "You'd have to hunt far and wide to find anyone as shipwrecked as I. Robinson's got nothing on me. I should think that there are only about 8 or 10 islands in the Atlantic and the Pacific that I have not landed on after shipwrecks. They are in a special blacklist in the tourist books." "Isn't it wonderful to be on a desert island?" asked Tommy. "I'd so much like to be shipwrecked, just once." "That's easily arranged," said Pippi. "There's no shortage of islands." "No, I know one not at all far away from here," said Tommy. "Is it in a lake?" asked Pippi. "Sure," said Tommy. "Swell," said Pippi, "for if it had been on dry land, it would have been no good." Tommy was wild with excitement. "Let's get shipwrecked," he cried. "Let's go now, right away." In 2 days, Tommy and Annika's summer vacation was to begin. And at the same time, their mother and father were going away. You couldn't find a better time to play Robinson Crusoe. "If you're going to be shipwrecked, you first have to have a boat," said Pippi. "And we haven't any," said Annika. I saw an old broken rowboat lying at the bottom of the river, said Pippi. But that has already been shipwrecked, said Annika. So much the better, said Pippi. Then it knows what to do. It was a simple matter for Pippi to pull out the sunken rowboat. She spent a whole day down by the river mending the boat with boards and tar, and one rainy morning in the woodshed making a pair of oars. Tommy and Annika's summer vacation began, and their parents went away. We'll be home in 2 days, said the children's mother. Now be very good and obedient, and remember that you must do just as Ella says. Ella was the maid, and she was going to look after Tommy and Annika while their mother and father were away. But when the children were alone with Ella, Tommy said, "You don't need to look after us at all because we're going to be with Pippi the whole time." "We can look after ourselves," said Annika. "Pippi never has anyone to look after her. Why can't we be left alone for 2 days at least?" Ella had no objection to having a couple of days off, and when Tommy and Annika had begged and teased her enough, Ella said she would go home and visit her own mother for a while. But the children must promise to eat and sleep properly and not run out at night without putting on warm sweaters. Tommy said he would gladly put on a dozen sweaters if only Ella would leave them alone. So Ella left, and 2 hours later, Pippi, Tommy, and Annika, the horse, and Mr. Nilsson started on their trip to the desert island. It was a mild evening in early summer. The air was warm, although the sky was cloudy. They had to walk quite a way before they came to the lake where the desert island was. Pippi carried the boat on her head. She had loaded an enormous sack and a tent on the horse's back. "What's in the sack?" asked Tommy. "Food and firearms, a blanket, and an empty bottle," said Pippi, "for I think we ought to have quite a comfortable shipwreck, since it's your first one. Otherwise, when I'm shipwrecked, I usually shoot an antelope or a llama and eat the meat raw. But there might not be any antelopes or llamas on this island, and it would be a shame if we would have to starve to death just on account of a little thing like that." "What are you going to use the empty bottle for?" asked Annika. "What am I going to use the empty bottle for? How can you ask anything so stupid? A boat is, of course, the most important thing when you're going to be shipwrecked, but next comes an empty bottle. My father taught me that while I was still in the cradle. Pippi," he said, "it doesn't matter if you forget to wash your feet when you're going to be presented at court, but if you forget the empty bottle when you're going to be shipwrecked, you might as well give up." "Yes, but what are you going to use it for?" insisted Annika. "Haven't you ever heard of a bottle letter? You write a letter and ask for help," said Pippi. "Then you stuff it in the bottle, put the stopper in, and throw the bottle into the water. And then it floats to someone who can come and save you. How on earth do you think you could be saved otherwise? Leave everything to chance? No, sir." "Oh, I see," said Annika. Soon they came to the edge of the little lake, and there in the middle of the lake was the desert island. The sun was just breaking through the clouds, throwing a warm glow over the early summer foliage. "Really," said Pippi, "this is one of the nicest desert islands I've ever seen." She quickly launched the boat onto the lake, lifted the pack off the horse, and stuffed everything into the bottom of the boat. Annika and Tommy and Mr. Nilsson jumped in. Pippi patted the horse. "My dear horse, no matter how much I would like it, I cannot ask you to sit in the bottom of the boat. I hope you can swim. It's very simple. Look." Pippi jumped into the lake with all her clothes on and swam a few strokes. It's lots of fun, you know. And if you want to have still more fun, you can play whale like this. Pippi filled her mouth with water, lay on her back, and squirted like a fountain. Sorry. Here's the horse looking at her, and she is swimming and squirting water out of her mouth like she's a whale. Well, the horse didn't look as if he thought that would be much fun. But when Pippi crawled into the boat, took the oars, and rowed off, the horse threw himself into the water and swam after her. He didn't play whale, though. When they had almost reached the island, Pippi yelled, "Man all the pumps!" And then in the next second, "In vain, in vain! We'll have to leave the ship! Every man for himself!" And she stepped up on the back seat of the boat and dived headfirst into the water. Soon she came up again, took hold of the rope on the boat, and swam for shore. I have to save the provisions anyway, so the crew might as well stay on board, she said. She tied the rope around a stone and helped Tommy and Annika ashore. Mr. Nilsson rescued himself. A miracle has happened, cried Pippi. We are saved, at least for the time being, unless there are cannibals and lions on this island. Even the horse had now reached the island. He got out of the water and shook himself. Good. Here comes the first mate, too, said Pippi. Let us all hold a council of war. Out of the sack, she took a pistol, which she had once found in a sea chest up in the attic. Holding the pistol straight in front of her, ready to fire, she sneaked about, looking carefully in all directions. What's the matter, Pippi? Asked Annika worriedly. I thought I heard the growling of a cannibal, said Pippi. You can never be careful enough. What would be the use of saving yourself from drowning, only to be served with stewed vegetables for a cannibal's dinner? No cannibals were to be seen. Aha! They have retreated and taken cover, said Pippi. Or perhaps they are sitting looking through their cookbooks to learn how they could cook us. And I'll tell you this. If they serve me with stewed carrots, I will never forgive them. I hate carrots. Oh, Pippi, don't talk like that, said Annika, shivering. Oh, you don't like carrots either? Well, anyway, let's put up the tent now. Pippi put up the tent in a sheltered place, and Tommy and Annika crept in and out of it and were perfectly happy. A short distance from the tent, Pippi placed some stones in a ring, and on top of these sticks and pine cones. Oh, how wonderful! Are we going to have a fire? Asked Annika. Yes, sirree, said Pippi. She took 2 pieces of wood and started to rub them together. Tommy was very much interested. Oh, Pippi, he said, delighted. Are you going to make a fire the way they do in the jungles? No, but my fingers are cold, said Pippi, and this is a good way to warm them. Let me see, where did I put the matches? Soon a bright fire was burning, and Tommy said he thought it was awfully cozy. Yes, and besides, it will keep the wild animals away, said Pippi. Annika drew in her breath sharply. What wild animals? She asked with a tremor in her voice. The mosquitoes, said Pippi, and thoughtfully scratched a large mosquito bite on her leg. Annika sighed with relief. Yes, and the lions too, of course, continued Pippi. I don't think it will help against pythons or against the American buffalo. She patted her pistol. But don't worry, Annika, she said. With this, I'll surely be able to defend us, even if we should be attacked by a field mouse. Then Pippi got out coffee and sandwiches, and the children sat around the fire and ate and enjoyed themselves immensely. Mr. Nilsson sat on Pippi's shoulder and ate too, and the horse stuck out his nose from time to time and got a piece of bread and a lump of sugar. There was also lots of tender green grass for him to eat. The sky was cloudy, and it began to grow dark. Annika moved up as near to Pippi as she could get. The flames threw strange shadows. It seemed as if the darkness were alive outside the little circle that was lighted by the fire. Annika shivered. Just suppose a cannibal was standing behind that bush, or a lion hiding behind that big stone over there. Pippi put down her coffee cup. 15 men on a dead man's chest. Yo ho ho, and a bottle of rum, she sang in her deep, hoarse voice. Annika shivered more than ever. I have that song in one of my books. Bye, guys, have fun. I have that song in one of my books, a pirate book, said Tommy eagerly. Really, said Pippi, then it must be Friedolf who wrote that book, for he taught me the song. How often I've sat on the afterdeck of my father's ship on starlit nights, and with the Southern Cross right over my head, and Friedolf beside me singing, 15 men on a dead man's chest, yo ho ho, and a bottle of rum, sang Pippi once more with an even hoarser voice. Pippi, I feel so funny inside me when you sing like that, said Tommy. It feels so terrible and wonderful at the same time. It feels almost only terrible inside me, said Annika, but a little wonderful too. I'm going to see when I get big, said Tommy decidedly. I'm going to be a pirate, just like you, Pippi. Swell, said Pippi, the terror of the Caribbean. That'll be you and me, Tommy. We'll plunder gold and jewels and precious stones, and we'll have a hiding place for our treasures way in a cave on a desert island in the Pacific Ocean, with 3 skeletons to watch the cave. We'll have a flag with a skull and crossbones, and we'll sing 15 Men on a Dead Man's Chest so that you can hear it from one end of the Atlantic to the other, and all seafaring pirates and sailors will turn pale when they hear us and think about throwing themselves into the sea to avoid our bloody revenge. What about me? Said Annika complainingly. I don't dare become a pirate. What'll I do? You can come along anyway, said Pippi, and just hang out. After a while, the fire died down. Time to go to bed, said Pippi. She had put spruce boughs on the ground under the tent, and on top of the spruce boughs, several thick blankets. Do you want to sleep with us in the tent? Pippi asked the horse, or would you rather stand out here under a tree with a blanket over you? Oh, so you always feel sick when you sleep in a tent? Okay, just as you like. Pippi gave him a friendly pat. Soon all 3 children and Mr. Nilsson laid rolled up in blankets in the tent. Outside, the waves lapped against the shore. Hear the ocean breakers, said Pippi dreamily. It was dark as pitch, and Annika held Pippi's hand, for everything seemed less dangerous then. Here is a picture of them in the tent. You can see the 3 children and the horse, and it looks like Mr. Nilsson is sitting on Annika yawning. Suddenly it began to rain. The raindrops splashed on the tent, but inside everything was warm and dry, and it seemed very pleasant to hear the pitter-patter of the raindrops. Pippi went out and put another blanket on the horse. He stood under a thick spruce tree, so he kept pretty dry. Isn't this wonderful? Tommy sighed when Pippi came in again. Sure, said Pippi, and look what I found under a stone. 3 chocolate bars. 3 minutes later, Annika was asleep with her mouth full of chocolate and her hand in Pippi's. We forgot to brush our teeth tonight, said Tommy, and then he too fell asleep. When Tommy and Annika woke up, Pippi had disappeared. They hurried to crawl out of the tent. The sun was shining brightly. In front of the tent, a new fire was burning, and Pippi was squatting by the fire, frying ham and boiling coffee. Congratulations and happy Easter, she called when she saw Tommy and Annika. Oh, it's not Easter, said Tommy. Isn't it? Well, save the wish until next year then, Pippi replied. The good smell of ham and coffee tickled the children's nostrils. They squatted around the fire, and Pippi passed around ham and eggs and potatoes, after which they drank coffee and ate molasses cookies, and never had a breakfast tasted so wonderful. I think we have it better than Robinson Crusoe, said Tommy. Yes, and if we could only get a little fresh fish for dinner, I'm afraid Robinson Crusoe would be green with envy, said Pippi. Ooh, I don't like fish, said Tommy. I don't either, said Annika. But Pippi cut off a long, narrow branch, tied a string to one end, made a hook out of a pin, and put a piece of bread on the hook and herself on a large stone down near the water. Now you'll see, she said. What will you fish for? Asked Tommy. Octopus, said Pippi. That's a delicacy beyond compare. She sat there a whole hour, but no octopus bit. A perch came up and sniffed at the piece of bread, but Pippi quickly drew away the hook. No, thank you, my boy, she said. When I say octopus, I mean octopus, and you shouldn't come stealing the bait. After a while, Pippi threw the fish pole in the lake. You were lucky, she said. We will have to eat pancakes. The octopuses are stubborn today. Tommy and Annika were satisfied. The water glistened invitingly in the sun. Shall we go for a swim? Asked Tommy. Pippi and Annika were game. The water was quite cold. Tommy and Annika stuck their big toes in, but then quickly pulled them out again. I know a better way, said Pippi. There was a rock quite near the shore, and and on top of the rock was a tree. The branches of the tree stretched themselves out over the water. Pippi climbed up into the tree and tied a rope around a branch. Like this, see? She took hold of the rope, swung herself out, and dropped into the water. You get ducked, what? And dropped into the water. You get dunked all over at once this way, she cried as her head came up out of the water. This is a great picture. So here's the rope that she swung out on, and she landed full on in the water. Tommy and Annika are watching. Anybody ever swung out on a rope into the water? Don't say anything, just raise your hand. Yeah, I think I've done that once or twice. Tommy and Annika were a little doubtful at first, but it looked like so much fun that they decided to try it. And when they had tried it once, they never wanted to stop, for it was even more fun than it looked. Mr. Nilsson wanted to try too. He slid down the rope, but just before he reached the water, he turned and scampered back up at a terrific pace. He did this each time, although the children called to him and told him that he was a coward. Then Pippi found that you could sit on a piece of board and slide down into the water, and that was fun too, for it made a terrific splash when you landed. That Robinson Crusoe, did he slide down a piece of board too? I wonder, said Pippi as she sat at the top of the rock ready to take off. No, it doesn't say so in the book, at least, said Tommy. Well, that's what I thought. I don't think there was much to his shipwreck. What did he do all day? Cross-stitch embroidery? Here I come. Pippi slid down into the water with her red braids streaming out behind her. After their swim, the children decided to explore the desert island thoroughly. All three got on the horse, and he jogged off good-naturedly. Uphill and down dale they rode, through the underbrush and between clumps of spruce, through marshes and over pretty little clearings where the grass was thick with wildflowers. Pippi sat with the pistol ready, and from time to time she fired a shot so that the horse jumped high into the air with fright. There, I shot a lion, she said with satisfaction. Or, now that cannibal has planted his last tomato. I think this island should be ours forever, said Tommy, when they returned to the camp and Pippi had started to make pancakes. Pippi and Annika thought so too. The pancakes tasted wonderful when you ate them steaming hot. There were no plates, no knives, no forks, and Annika said, "May we eat with our fingers?" "It's all right with me if you do," said Pippi, "but for my part, I'll stick to the old method of eating with my mouth." "Oh, you know what I mean, silly," said Annika. She took a pancake in her hand and put it into her mouth with great enjoyment. And then night came again. The fire burned down. Snuggled close to each other, their faces smeared with pancake, the children lay in their blankets. A big star shone through the crack in the tent. The ocean breakers lulled them to sleep. "We have to go home today," said Tommy sadly the next morning. "Isn't it a shame?" said Annika. "I would like to stay here all summer, but Mommy and Daddy are coming home today." After breakfast, Tommy went exploring down by the lake. Suddenly he let out a loud cry. The boat! It was gone! Annika was much upset. How would they ever be able to get away from there? She did want to be on the island all summer, but it was different when you knew you couldn't go home. And what would poor Mommy say when she found out that Tommy and Annika had disappeared? Annika's eyes filled with tears when she thought of it. "What's the matter with you, Annika?" asked Pippi. "What is your idea of a shipwreck anyway? What do you think Robinson Crusoe would have said if a ship had come along and picked him up when he had been on the desert island only 2 days? 'Here you are, Mr. Crusoe. Please come aboard and be saved and bathed and shaved and get your toenails cut.' No, thank you. I think surely Mr. Crusoe would have run and hidden behind a bush. For if you've at last landed on a desert island, you would like to stay here for at least 7 years. 7 years? Annika shivered and Tommy looked thoughtful. "Well, I don't mean that we should stay here forever," said Pippi comfortingly. "When Tommy has to go to military school, we'll have to let folks know where we are, I guess. But perhaps he can get a year or two's postponement." Annika became more and more desperate. Pippi looked at her searchingly. "Well, if you're going to take it like that, there's nothing for us to do but send off the bottle letter." She dug the empty bottle out of the sack. She also managed to find some paper and a pencil. Putting these on a stone in front of Tommy, she said, "You know more about the art of writing than I do." "But what shall I write?" asked Tommy. "Let me think a moment." Pippi pondered. "Oh, you can write this. Help us before we perish. We have been on this island for 2 days without snuff." "Oh, but Pippi, we can't write that," said Tommy reproachfully. "It isn't true." "What isn't true?" "We can't write without snuff," said Tommy. "Oh, we can't," said Pippi. "Have you any snuff?" "No," said Tommy. "Has Annika any snuff?" "No, of course not. But have I any snuff?" continued Pippi. "No, maybe you haven't," said Tommy, "but we don't use snuff." "Well, that's just what I want you to write. We've been without snuff for 2 days." "Yes, but if we write that, people will think we use snuff," insisted Tommy. "Now look here, Tommy," said Pippi, "will you just answer this? Which people are more often without snuff? The ones who use it or the ones who don't?" "The ones who don't, of course," said Tommy. "Well, what are you fussing about then?" said Pippi. "Write it as I tell you." So Tommy wrote, "Help us before we perish. We have been on this island for 2 days without snuff." Snuff is like a tobacco, like in cigarettes. And in the olden days, people would use it all the time. Sometimes they'd sniff it up their nose. Sometimes they'd put it in their mouth. It's super, super gross. But, I think in the time that this was written, people used it a lot. Um, Pippi took the paper, stuffed it into the bottle, put the stopper in, and threw the bottle into the water. "Now we should soon be rescued," she said. The bottle floated off, but shortly came to rest, caught in some tree roots near the shore. "Well, we'll have to throw it out farther," said Tommy. "That would be the most stupid thing we could do," said Pippi, "for if it floats far away, our rescuers won't know where to look for us. But if it lies here, we can call to them when they have found it, and then we'll be rescued right away." Pippi sat down by the shore. "It's best that we can keep our eyes on the bottle the whole time," she said. Tommy and Annika sat down beside her. After 10 minutes, Pippi said impatiently, "People must think that we haven't got anything else to do but sit here and wait to get rescued. Where can they be, anyway?" "What people?" asked Annika. "The ones who are going to rescue us," said Pippi. "It's unforgivable when you consider that human lives are at stake." Annika began to believe that they really were going to perish on the island, but suddenly Pippi raised a finger in the air and cried, "My goodness, but I'm thoughtless! How could I forget it?" "What?" said Tommy. "The boat," said Pippi. "I carried it up on shore last night after you had gone to sleep." "But why did you do that?" asked Annika reproachfully. "I was afraid it might get wet," said Pippi. In a jiffy, she had fetched the boat, which lay well hidden under a spruce. She shoved it into the lake and said grimly, There, now the rescuers can come. For when they come to rescue us, they'll come in vain, because now we are rescuing ourselves, and that will be a good one on them. It will teach them to hurry up next time." "Well, I hope we get home before Mom and Daddy," said Annika when they were in the boat and Pippi was rowing towards shore with strong strokes. "How worried will Mommy be otherwise?" "I don't think she will," said Pippi. Mr. and Mrs. Settergren got home half an hour before the children. No Tommy and Annika were in sight, but in the mailbox was a piece of paper on which was printed. Okay, this is in Pippi's writing. I'll show you in a second. Let's see if I can read it. "For goodness sake, don't think your children murdered or lost. They aren't at all. They are just a little shipwrecked and will soon come home, I swear. Greetings from Pippi." And that is the end of the chapter. Pippi is shipwrecked.